Two and a Half Admins, episode 26. I'm Joe.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Alan.
And here we are again. And before we get started, you've got yet another blog post to plug, Alan.
Yes. Continuing our series about the history of FreeBSD, and we have one now on the history of jails and basically the beginning of containers. So especially if you're bought into this wave of stuff about containers, it's very interesting to see about where it came from originally.
Yeah, you're the hipsters when it comes to containers, eh?
Something like that.
I mean, honestly, my first introduction to virtual private servers was not VMs, it was FreeBSD jails.
Yeah, before hardware virtualization, it was really the only option. Like every other kind of VPS was just terribly slow.
All right, well, let's do some news then. The first one is changes to LastPass free, or in other words, how LastPass died.
I got an anonymous tip this morning about this. A LastPass user DM'd me on Twitter and was like, hey, have you seen this? LastPass is basically, killing their free service. And they're not actually killing it technically, but what they're doing is almost worse. They're making it so that as of March 16th, you have the choice, if you're a LastPass free user, of accessing your passwords either from a computer or from mobile, but not both. You got to pick one. If you want to be able to use your passwords and log into websites on either your computer or your phone, you're going to have to pony up $27 a year for a premium account.
That's not very much, is it, really?
Not really, but at the same time, there are other alternatives. And, it's an interesting way to decide. It's like you can still use multiple devices, just they all have to be desktops or laptops, or they all have to be phones, tablets, and watches. You can use 7 computers, but you can't use one computer and one phone.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, what it kind of comes down to is effectively, you basically have to either be a kid or homeless for the free to work for you. I don't know anybody who uses a computer who isn't also going to need to be able to access their passwords, from a phone. So this really kind of only works for people who never use anything but a phone to begin with.
Most of my stuff on my phone, I don't have to log into very often. And I guess I have a couple of things that I do have to log into frequently on my phone set up to use the fingerprint thingy.
I think that makes you a pretty unusual password manager user, though.
Yes, I do not use my phone for very many things. If I need something, I would go to a computer.
Yeah, I mean, neither you nor I are the typical password manager user, Alan. That in my experience, most of the folks who are in the market for something like LastPass or 1Password or any of those, the way they're using it, they have no idea what the passwords are to any of their services. They never type anything in. It's all, randomly generated strings of trash that's automatically filled by a plugin for their password manager in the browser. So when they lose access to that, on their mobile phone, that basically just means they can no longer browse the web on a phone.
Well, I put it to you that it's not common for people to use password managers, and it's much more common for them to have Chrome generate them a password and use Chrome's built-in password manager that syncs across all devices. So this isn't really going to bother most normal people because normal people don't use an external password manager.
To a degree, I agree with you there, Joe. I think what you're missing there, it's kind of like when we talk about the year of Linux on the desktop, right? Everybody says, you've got to be this hideously advanced user, to be a Linux desktop person. And I think all three of us know that's absolutely not the case. Very, very basic users generally have no problem switching from Windows to Mac or Linux at all. The folks who have the problem are the power users. And I think that's kind of, where you really find the big market for password managers like LastPass or 1Password or, whatever. It's these folks that they've got the basic idea that, hey, I need to take my security more seriously, but they haven't, quite gotten to the point where, for instance, I am with using diceware passphrases that, I store in KeePass just in case I forget them. And I don't want browser plugins because I want more separation. But there are tons of people out there of all kinds of skill levels that are absolutely using LastPass. I mean, I run into them in my professional consulting experience nonstop.
Well, and it's very handy to have one tool that works across 4 different operating systems to manage your passwords. Because, your password should be long random strings that you don't actually know. Because otherwise, one of them gets compromised and you reused it too much. Your human brain just can't have that many passwords in it. And so you need some kind of system or tool. And something like this is generally better.
I will say again, Alan, speak for your own human brain, because mine doesn't have any problem with around 100 to 150 Diceware style passphrases at a time. Once you hit that number, eventually the least used will kind of pop out of the bottom of the stack. But that's what I use KeyPass for. When I need something that I haven't used in like 3 or 4 months and it's dropped off the bottom of the stack.
That's always the one that gets me, is the password I haven't needed in the last 4 months.
Right. But there's a big difference between, I have human memorable and unique to the service passphrases for everything, and I occasionally need to remind myself of one of them, versus I have no idea what my credentials actually are for anything, and I'm cripplingly dependent on this browser extension.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of chatter about people moving to Bitwood, and apparently it's quite easy to move to that, and you can self-host it or pay them or whatever, and that seems to be where it's at these days.
Yeah. Although, in this typical, the cobbler's children have no shoes type of thing, I don't actually want something self-hosted, but I kind of do. I want something that works well, that doesn't involve something janky like rsync to my phone or something. Something that's as easy as LastPass, but without the craziness.
For me, that's where KeyPass comes in. So I kind of feel like that's the best of both worlds, because I use KeyPass. The application itself, I have to unlock my vault, with the master passphrase. And I just store the actual binary image on a Google Drive. And so that way I've got access to it on, any computer, phone, tablet, whatever I need to. On mobile, where I need the absolute minimum of, hinky crap because of the interface, the Android app will literally just access it directly from the Google Drive. So there's no sync weirdness. It all just works.
It's an interesting business decision. Like I would have thought they would get further by limiting the number of devices or something, but that might be pretty hard to do with a browser type thing anyway. And I guess bifurcating the type, like Jim said, most people's use case is probably 1 device of each type, not 4 devices of one type. And that this will get a lot more people to go from free to the $28 a year or whatever.
Yeah, and they must have done the math on that it's worth it. I mean, even if a bunch of their free users leave, what do they care? If 5% of them sign up, then they're still far better off than when they started.
It's not just that as of March, they're basically going to kill the utility of the free tier. I mentioned that you'll be able to choose if you're on free, whether you want to use it on mobile or whether you want to use it on a computer, but you can't do both. The really nasty thing wasn't in the original pop-up at all, and I didn't find it in the FAQ entry either. I didn't see it until the tipster forwarded me the actual email that they received tonight, which says that beginning March 16th, 2021, LastPass Free will include access on one device type of your choice. The first device you log in with on or after March 16th will set your active device type. So this is not a case of like when you log in, it's going to ask you to make a choice. If you aren't paying attention and you happen to log in, on your phone on March 16th, well, congratulations. Your account is now phone only. Or vice versa if you log in with a computer.
Ooh, that is nasty.
Yeah. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that get caught completely off guard by this. And I suspect that LogMeIn, who is, that's who owns LastPass now, I suspect they will, in fact, see a sudden gigantic rush of, $27 purchases. The real question is whether those people that make that panicked $27 buy to get access back to their passwords for right now, will they still be here next year? Or is that just going to be what they need to do to get their crap and take it someplace safer?
No way. People who pay the $27 will forget about it. They'll mean to move away and then they'll forget about it for a few months. And then maybe as the time approaches, they'll mean to do it again and they won't get around to it. They'll get distracted. And then it'll be, it's $27. I'll do it next year. And that's what they're counting on.
Yeah, the number of businesses that rely on people seeing the line on the credit card bill being like, I should cancel that, but it's not enough money for me to do it right now. I'll do it tomorrow. And then, oh, look, it's been another month and another month or whatever.
Exactly.
I'll cop to that. I signed up for the $5 a month Mozilla VPN like 6 months ago just so I could, install it and review it. And I still haven't canceled the damn thing.
Case in point.
Exactly.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Linode. Go to linode.com/2.5 to get started with $100 free credit. Whether you're working on a personal project or managing enterprise infrastructure, Linode offers simple, affordable, and accessible cloud computing solutions that allow you to take your project to the next level. Simplify your cloud infrastructure with Linode's Linux virtual machines and develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and more easily. Lernard has 11 global data centers and provides 24/7 365 human support with no tiers or handoffs regardless of your plan size. In addition to shared and dedicated compute instances, you can use your $100 credit on S3 compatible object storage, managed Kubernetes, and more. Let us know about the projects you've been using Linode for, and we might mention them on the show. Our website is hosted with Linode, and we're really happy there. So go to linode.com/2.5 and click on the Create Free Account button to get started. That's linode.com/2.5. All right, let's talk about Nvidia buying ARM. So this was announced last year, Nvidia's intention to buy ARM, and there were some complaints about it at the time, some objections. But recently, Qualcomm has raised very serious objections to this.
As well they should.
Yeah, this is the ISA and the instruction set is a little bit different than, it's different than even just buying the fab or something. It's the company that controls the licensing for everybody else's ARM chips, right? Like if you're Qualcomm and you make your own Qualcomm ARM chips, but you have to license the technology and suddenly it's owned by your competitor instead of this neutral third party, that probably starts to feel like an uncomfortable situation.
ARM themselves do not make hardware. They do not sell hardware. They basically just exist to license intellectual property to people who design full working equipment and manufacture it. Being that they don't manufacture or sell hardware themselves, they're in a very neutral position where they don't really have a horse in the race to say, hey, we don't want to license our technology to company X because we're competing with them and that would be a conflict. Now, Nvidia, on the other hand, are very much a hardware design, sales, and manufacture company. So even if Nvidia doesn't have direct designs right away to, for example, get into the smartphone CPU business, it's not at all hard to imagine them having a very different and much more biased perspective. You know, the next time somebody comes around and says, you know, hey, we want to license some ARM cores and, design a new system on chip to go into a new phone or tablet or a game console or whatever, that could very easily have major business conflicts with NVIDIA's own business model.
Yeah, or even just NVIDIA makes a new iteration that's faster and better and decides not to license it to anybody other than NVIDIA.
I don't think that part is necessarily the biggest concern because, I mean, that's not really much of any different than Apple designing, the fastest ARM SoC that's ever existed on the planet and not licensing it to anybody else. I think the bigger issue is just whether NVIDIA stops developing, the base licensable ARM IP at all. And basically, they keep iterating, but they don't share any of that with anybody for any purpose. And, it ends up being kind of like the scenarios that, open source folks had back in the 2000s when everybody was talking about Microsoft's, embrace, extend, extinguish strategy, where you say, hey, you fork this permissively licensed open source project and you take it in a new direction and you get everybody in the world to use that. And now nobody cares about the old MIT license thing anymore. All they care about is your new proprietary version.
It is interesting, especially, ARM is really catching on right now, and there's like server grade ARM stuff coming, and things are looking great, and that's why NVIDIA is interested in it. But is NVIDIA going to end up being a good steward for ARM64 or ARM going forward, or is it more they're like now we'll have all of the component now that we've bought Mellanox for the network interconnect stuff, and we have our GPGPU stuff. And now we'll have our own custom CPU cores and licenses. We'll be able to make an end-to-end solution and basically compete with everyone at once.
It's pretty clear why they would want to do this. A lot of NVIDIA's revenue these days is not consumer GPUs. It's, AI, machine learning, supercomputer stuff. And historically, that has depended on their very tight partnership with Intel Xeon, general purpose CPU technology, which is that partnership is looking a heck of a lot rockier now with, Intel getting more and more serious about its own GPU business. Right now, Intel Xe GPUs are not necessarily all that impressive, but they're getting more so. And in particular, when it comes to talking about using their GPUs with machine learning, You also have to look at Intel's big One API initiative, which decouples the machine learning code from the individual GPU hardware it might run on. Right now, Nvidia has a pretty horrendous lock on GPU accelerated machine learning because almost everybody doing the coding is coding specifically for CUDA cores that, only come in Nvidia products. But if Intel manages to get One API to catch on, now you get, write once, run anywhere. You don't care which GPU you're running it on, it just works. So if Intel pulls that off and their Xe GPUs, keep getting more performant, they don't have a whole lot of need for NVIDIA anymore, which leaves NVIDIA scrambling for their own CPU solution.
Yeah, and even just that, the CPU solution you need for some of that machine learning stuff is, if all the work's being done on the GPU, the CPU is mostly there just to run the interconnect, right? It's got to route the traffic between the memory and the GPUs, or between the GPU and the network where it's going to store all this data that it's processing. And so something lower power and higher concurrency like ARM might make more sense, and also has more options to extend the instruction set to have whatever special instructions you might need to do things as efficiently as possible.
Well, you would definitely need to buy ARM to extend the instruction set like you're talking about, because you're not going to do that until you're the one that actually owns the IP. If ARM continues to hold it, they're not going to approve you just going off and adding your own instructions. This is ARM, it's not RISC-V. I do want to say also, I think you're underplaying the role of the CPU in GPU accelerated machine learning, Alan. Yeah, you need the CPU for the interconnect, but there's also, for most workloads, there still ends up being some pretty heavy CPU-driven stuff that's part of the workload.
Yeah, I was just saying that sometimes to get the good features, like even just SHA-256 offload, you have to buy a gold type Xeon, not even just a silver or whatever, or platinum. And being able to get a CPU that has the stuff you need and not a lot of the excess, and be able to get the unit price down, means that if you have to fill 20 racks with these things to get the amount of AI stuff you want to do done, then every bit helps.
So you're not so much talking about changing the instruction set as being able to redesign the SoC for the CPU itself and add additional hardware offload.
Yeah.
Fair.
So let's say that you both had to gamble a couple thousand Dogecoin on the outcome of this. What do you think is going to happen? Are NVIDIA going to get away with buying ARM or not?
Absolutely not. Not going to happen.
Because of the nature of it, there are too many different countries that would have to approve it for it to happen. And I think that's what's going to be the big difference.
To quote our former president of the United States of America, China.
I can see China being worried that, and if it's owned by NVIDIA now, then they might try to block Huawei from having ARM cores and so on. Whereas when it's in the UK, it's maybe slightly different.
To be clear, the they there is the United States government, not NVIDIA themselves.
Right, yes.
ARM is based in the UK. NVIDIA is a United States company, and China has already seen some pretty heavy-handed U.S. regulation of what our Trump administration considered, quote, U.S. technology, unquote, and banning the use of it in its political opponents.
Yeah. And separately, the UK itself has its own political ideas about letting ARM go to not be based in the UK.
Well, that's the thing, that ARM's owned by SoftBank, right? Which is a Japanese company. It might be based, the offices might be in the UK.
Well, so when SoftBank bought ARM, they had to meet a whole long list of UK requirements, including keeping at least X thousand people employed in the UK, making sure this and that specific things happened in the UK. And I imagine they would try to attach similar riders to an NVIDIA thing, but I don't know how interested they are in having it actually change hands again.
Even if NVIDIA was okay with the exact same set of riders and be like, okay, we can own it, but we got to put a ton of business in the United Kingdom, I don't think that would placate China in the least. I mean, China has seen, again, the Trump administration say, you can't have any more Android because, Google's our company and it's our technology. And so, screw you. And came very close to killing a couple of, large phone manufacturers in China because of that. I can't imagine the Chinese government is going to be excited about the idea that might get repeated with the hardware this time.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Learnard. Sign up at automation.link and use the code admins to upgrade and get 50% off a year's subscription to a new DevOps training site called Lernard. The site covers the entire DevOps stack, starting with the basics of infrastructure as code, and includes almost 8 hours of lessons on Terraform, Ansible, Jenkins, and loads of industry tips along the way. If you're interested in learning DevOps, take advantage of this offer by visiting automation.link and upgrade with 50% off with the code admins. That's automation.link and the code admins. Let's do some free consulting then. If you want to send your questions in for Jim and Alan, the best way is email show@2.5admins.com. And thank you everyone who is supporting us on PayPal and Patreon. It's really appreciated. If you want to join those people, go to 2.5admins.com/support and you'll find links there. And remember, for $5 or more per month on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed, so check it out. So the first one then, Boss Jan, I think that's how you say it, writes to us. I have a little bit of a different question about backups. Who or what is a backup of you? If you get hit by a bus or in lockdown time, fall down from the couch and get injured, so you end up in a coma for a couple of months, who can take care of all your IT cattle? Who knows all the quirks of your IT infrastructure and who has access to the keys? I'd love to hear your personal best practices and if you know other companies' policies that have this kind of backup.
This is basically one of those things that you definitely have to have a policy, but there's a lot of different approaches. And there's pros and cons to everything. If you have a delegated fallback for, if you step in front of a bus, that's also a big potential security risk. I ended up personally making the decision that, my fallback policy is all of the passwords that I know that my clients don't know. They're local and on the hardware, and basically you can just boot into safe mode and reset the root password. And I have instructed my clients on that and said, what you need is a competent Linux consultant. And my suggestion to them, which they haven't always taken, has been, you actually shouldn't ask me for that root password for that consultant to use. That's your first litmus test as to is this potentially a good replacement for Jim? If it takes them longer than 10 minutes to get into this system they have physical access to, then that's not a good fit. You need to call the next guy in the phone book.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different approaches. For example, in the sysadmin team for the FreeBSD.org cluster itself, there's a shared secret file that's encrypted with kind of a SSSS type thing, so key sharing. So there's two files. There's one where anybody with a key that's part of the group can decrypt it and get things like the console password for the servers to fix it if it doesn't work or whatever. And then there's the super secrets, and that one requires any 3 of the 8 people to agree to unlock it, and then you can read the secrets. So you can have systems like that where either there's an encrypted thing somewhere and any one of the people can access it, or you can have a system where, any N of M people together can construct enough of the key to decrypt it and be able to access the information. Sometimes that is, hey, at our company, my business partner just happens to have access to everything I do, just in case I'm not around. Or another one where it's if 2 or 3 of the people from the team agree that they need this, then they can unlock it and get it even if I'm not around. It's become more of a thing to, as part of your living will or final will, to have some instructions about what to deal with your online stuff. And whether that's, here's the master password for my KeyPass that will unlock all the passwords to get you into the things. Because, if I'm dead or incapacitated, then I don't need them anymore. For me, it was here's a list of people you need to notify so that I don't just disappear off the internet. People actually know that what happened to me.
Okay, Dominic wrote to us, I decided it's time to roll my own cloud on my home server. The problem is that my home internet connection has a slowish upload speed, so while access at home would be quick, access on the go would still be slow by default. I'm planning to use Nextcloud in Docker on my home server and proxy external access to it via a web server running on my VPS. Both systems communicate via WireGuard, and both internal and external access runs off the same domain transparently. What I want to achieve is to cache resources on my VPS so external access to my data doesn't get bottlenecked by my home connection upload bandwidth. At the same time, I want a solid solution with an Android app that will do automatic camera upload. Integration into external storage, as well as easy and secure sharing options with other users and strangers on the internet, would be a big bonus, but aren't strictly required. Are there viable alternatives to Nextcloud in the light of those requirements? Or do you see an alternative combining several solutions to get the same results?
The short answer to this is no. I don't think that this product or some mishmash of products together is going to get you what you really want, which is storage that actually lives on your home computer but is magically cached to internet speed by your VPS out in the cloud. I don't think that's going to be a thing. I think that your true choices here are either you choose to have your Nextcloud instance on your LAN and you've got lightning quick access on the LAN, but it's slow everywhere else, or you choose to cloud host it and you deal with it being the same speed from everywhere, including from your local network.
Yeah. With caching, you have a number of different problems. Like if you try to do just regular HTTP cache, like with Nginx on the VPS, the files are only going to be fast for files you've already accessed once. And so if it was slow, if it's fast tomorrow because you accessed it today, that's not really that helpful because you're not likely to pull the same file twice anyway. And then if you're trying to do some kind of replication or something, then you don't want to be modifying both sides, and that's kind of the point of something like OwnCloud, Nextcloud, whatever. And so it just gets messy. And then or you have invalidation problems where you update a file, but the cached copy on the VPS doesn't notice that you changed that file because you did it at home. And now the VPS gives you the old copy and you've lost some of your changes and it gets very confusing, especially with things like calendars.
Well, this is supposed to be fixed by federation and that you can federate two servers together. But I think that the theory here is very nice, but from my experience of using a system, I didn't set it up, but it was set up. It didn't work flawlessly 100% of the time. And I think that is the issue. If it doesn't work 100% of the time, it doesn't work. Right.
And the other point is I'm assuming by the talk of caching here, they don't want the VPS to have a copy of everything, just the things that you're using. And, if it can't predict that, which it can't, then it's never going to have the right things anyway. And, paying to have a second copy in the cloud, as a backup or whatever, maybe makes sense. But for active access, it gets much more complicated. Distributed computing is hard.
There's your pull quote right there.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that Justin recently wrote to us about OwnCloud Infinite Scale, which he thinks is much faster than Nextcloud in his testing. So it may be worth giving that a try. But yeah, I think, selective caching and predictive caching, that is impossible. Surely we don't have that technology yet. Maybe with the right AI one day, but right now, that seems a bit far-fetched.
Yeah. I saw the email about the infinite scale thing. I was a little curious about the benchmark or whatever they were using there. It's like copying a whole bunch of files is generally going to take a couple of seconds just because it's a number of separate operations. But I don't see how you could get, a 15x improvement that easily. Either the files are very small and sure they all uploaded, or OwnCloud lied about how long it took to upload.
So we brought up federation of servers and this idea that you just upload once and, the change is made everywhere and everything's just smooth and awesome and easy peasy. When you look at OwnCloud's Infinite Scale landing page, it says it scales. Database-less and multi-threading OwnCloud Infinite Scale 1.1.0 is already 10 times faster as the classic OwnCloud. No matter whether on a Raspberry Pi in your basement or in a geo-distributed setup for 100,000 users with millions of small files, OwnCloud Infinite Scale runs smoothly. At the least cynical interpretation of that, I would just like to point out that at no point did they say that setting up the geo-distributed setup for 100,000 users would be as simple as setting up the single Raspberry Pi. Within the amount of engineering effort and maintenance effort that we can reasonably expect for, this one listener who wants to set up his thing both at home and in the cloud, I don't think that's all going to add up to something workable.
Is the elephant in the room here just use Dropbox?
I can't answer that because we don't know exactly what our listener wants to use OwnCloud for. He might just be using it as a literal Dropbox substitute, or he could be using it for all sorts of different things.
And Dropbox doesn't really necessarily give you the option of make it really fast on my LAN and not stupid slow off my LAN.
It does. My understanding is it does. If you've got the clients on two machines on your LAN, it will sync across the LAN rather than across the internet. It's smart like that.
Right, but that requires keeping a copy of all the files on every machine that's running Dropbox.
That's what Dropbox does.
All the files that you want to have synced. You just set it up with the relevant directories or whatever.
I can also tell you from bitter experience that it doesn't always work that way. you will very frequently see, one user in a small business decide that they need to upload 50 gigs of raw photos from a camera after some weekend exhibition. And all of a sudden, all 50 gigs worth of things start downloading to 100 other computers in the building simultaneously from the cloud.
Right. Fair enough. All right. Well, we better get out of here then. Remember, show@2.5admins.com if you want to send your questions in. You can find me on Twitter @Joe Ressington.
I'm @JRSSNet.
And I'm @Alan Jude.
We'll see you next week.